The dare under the banyan tree. Hi everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about something that'll make you want to sleep with the lights on, or maybe just ... not sleep at all. Imagine this, an old village where everyone knows everyone, but no one dares walk past the cemetery after dark. You know, the kind of place where people whisper about ghosts instead of gossiping about their neighbors. That's where our story begins. So, before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, if you're brave enough, drop your location and the time down in the comments. Let's see who's watching this at 3 AM now. Turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for that soft background hum. And let's get started tonight. The night was damp and restless, like the air itself was holding its breath. Beneath the massive banyan tree that loomed over the edge of the village, 5 young men huddled in a circle. The lantern in the center flickered weakly, casting their faces in shades of amber and shadow. They were the kind of boys who thought fear was a challenge, not a warning. There was Min, the ringleader with the half-grin that always made you nervous. Luan, the skeptic who claimed ghosts were just bad storytelling. Bao, who laughed at everything even at midnight in a graveyard. Keen, the quiet one who followed because he was too polite to say no. And finally, Duck, the one who pretended to be brave but was already regretting being there. It had started, like all bad ideas do, with a dare. The old man at the tea stall had been talking about the cemetery again, the one behind the banyan tree. He said that after midnight, if you listened carefully, the tree whispered names. Not just any names, but the names of people who would die soon. Min had smirked and said, "So what if we go there and listen ourselves?" That's how they ended up here, surrounded by the scent of damp leaves and old earth. The wind brushing through the banyans, hanging, roots like invisible fingers. The air was unusually cold for a summer night. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled once, and then nothing. The silence stretched too long, too tight. "Do you guys hear that?" Bo whispered. "Hear what?" Luan asked, but his voice wasn't as steady as he hoped. "The air, it's like it's breathing." Min chuckled. "Relax, it's just wind. You city kids get spooked by everything." He tilted his head back, looking up at the twisted canopy above. "They say this tree is older than the village itself. You think it remembers who planted it?" Keen kicked at a root, muttering, "Or who's buried under it." And that's when it happened, the first whisper. It was faint, like a sigh carried on the wind. Then another. The lantern flickered. Bao leaned closer. "Did it just say something?" No one answered, because they all heard it. A voice, low, stretched, and strange. It wasn't coming from one direction but from everywhere above, around, beneath. The sound crawled into their ears, soft but cold enough to raise goosebumps. And then, a name. Luan, single quotes. Even Min's grin faltered. "That's convenient," he said, forcing a laugh. "Maybe the tree's got a sense of humor." But Luan's face had gone pale. "No," he whispered. "That wasn't wind. That was another whisper." Cut him off. Another name. Kien, single quotes. As. The boys didn't move for a long moment. The banyan's roots swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. The lantern dimmed until the flame was barely visible, painting their faces with the glow of fear. "Okay," Duck said quickly, voice trembling. "This is enough for tonight. We proved it. The tree's haunted. Let's go." But Min, ever the fool, shook his head. "No, not yet. We haven't even reached the cemetery. You guys want to tell everyone you chickened out before we even got there." Bo tried to joke, but it came out wrong. "Yeah, because wandering into a graveyard after hearing your name whispered by a tree sounds like a smart life choice." They argued quietly, half out of fear, half out of pride. Finally, Min's stubbornness won. "We walked through the old path behind the banyan. It leads straight to the gate. We'll stay an hour, maybe less. Then we go home." No one agreed out loud, but one by one they stood, brushing the dirt off their clothes. As they left the tree behind, Duck looked back one last time. The branches were still swaying gently in the still air, and for a brief second, he thought he saw something hanging among the roots, something pale, like a hand. He blinked, and it was gone. The group walked along the narrow path between the rice fields, the light of their lantern bouncing weakly off the mist. The banyan faded behind them, but the whispers didn single quotes in the silence between steps. They could still hear faint echoes, voices calling softly from the distance. Sometimes it sounded like laughter, sometimes like sobbing, and somewhere in the darkness, something else was walking with them. The old stories always said spirits followed those who disrespected the banyan tree. Some said it was the guardian of the cemetery. Others said it fed on curiosity. Whatever it was, the boys didn't know they had already crossed the line between the living and the listening. They would reach the gate soon, the one that was supposed to stay closed forever. "Can you guys get out of this alive tonight?" Because the whispers were getting louder, and this was only the beginning. The gate that shouldn't open, the old cemetery gate, looked like something pulled out of a nightmare. Two rusted iron doors, crooked on their hinges, bound together by a chain that had long ago lost its strength. A faint smell of wet earth and decay floated out from beyond it. The air was heavy, as if every breath came with a warning. Min held up the lantern, its flame fluttering wildly. The others stood close behind, eyes darting at the shapes of tilted gravestones barely visible in the fog. "Still think this is a good idea?" Bo asked, rubbing his arms. Min didn't answer. He stepped forward, testing the chain. It clanged softly, then fell apart with almost no effort. The gate opened by itself, as if it had been waiting. "See," Min said, trying to sound confident. "Not locked. It's like they want visitors." "Or maybe," Luan muttered, "because no one who goes in ever comes back to lock it again." The group laughed weakly, but no one smiled. They stepped through. The ground was uneven, the soil soft from days of mist. The lantern light revealed rows of headstones covered in moss and names barely readable. Somewhere deeper inside, a stone cross leaned at a sharp angle, like it was trying to crawl out of the earth. Duck lagged behind, glancing nervously at the gate. He couldn't help but notice that, though they had just opened it, it had already started to swing shut again slowly, silently. "Hey Min," he called, "maybe we should keep that open. You know, just in case." "Just in case, what?" Min turned, his grin fading when he saw the gate had already closed on its own. Luan stepped up, trying to push it open. It didn't move. "It's stuck," Min said quickly, though his tone wasn't sure. "It's fine. We're fine." But no one felt fine. They walked deeper. The mist thickened around them, muffling their footsteps. The only sound was the creak of tree branches overhead and something else. A faint ringing. Keen froze. "You guys hear that?" Everyone stopped. The ringing was faint at first, then clearer. It was the sound of an old phone, but there were no houses nearby, no lights, no reason for a phone to ring in a cemetery. Bo forced a chuckle. "Okay, who's got the ringtone set to Haunted Graveyard Edition?" No one replied. The ringing came again, closer. This time they followed the sound until they reached a small mausoleum, half covered in ivy. The door was half open, and inside, faint light pulsed in rhythm with the ringing. Min leaned closer. "It's coming from in there." Luan grabbed his arm. "No, we're not doing this." Min shrugged him off. "You guys wait here. I'll check." Min. Too late. He pushed the door open. The others had no choice but to follow. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp stone and old incense. There was a table at the far end, and on it an antique rotary phone. Its black surface gleamed faintly, untouched by dust. It rang again, shrill and unnatural in the silence. "Who the hell leaves a phone in here?" Bo whispered. Min reached out, hand trembling just a little. "Let's find out." "Don't," Duck shouted, but the warning came too late. Min lifted the receiver. The ringing stopped. For a second, there was only silence. Then a voice whispered through the line, soft and broken, like it came from underwater. "Why did you open the gate?" Min's eyes widened. He stumbled back, dropping the receiver. It swung on its cord, hitting the table with a dull thud. No one spoke. The air felt wrong, like it was vibrating, humming. Then, slowly, the phone started ringing again. Luan bolted for the door. "We're done. We're leaving." They pushed out of the mausoleum, but when they stepped outside, the fog was thicker than before. The path they came from was gone. The gravestones had shifted somehow, facing different directions, as if the entire cemetery had rearranged itself. "This isn't right," Keen whispered. "This wasn't here before." And then, in the fog, they saw movement, shadows drifting between the graves, silent and slow. At first they looked like people, but as the lantern light brushed over one of them, they realized it wasn't a person at all. Its face was pale, almost transparent. Its eyes were empty holes. The body moved with a limp, gliding motion, the way something moves when it's forgotten what bones are supposed to do. Duck dropped the lantern. The light flickered, then went out. They ran through the mist, tripping over stones, colliding with tree roots, calling each other's names. Every direction looked the same. Every step felt like it led them deeper. Min turned back once and saw the mausoleum. Door still opened, and the phone inside still glowing faintly. He could hear it ringing even over the sound of their footsteps. "Keep going," Bao shouted. But the gate never appeared again. The cemetery stretched on forever now. Endless rows of graves in every direction. The mist whispered around them, faintly echoing the same question again and again. "Why did you open the gate?" They didn't answer. They COULDN single quotes T. Because one by one the voices began calling their names, the same way the banyan had, somewhere behind them. The phone rang a final time and stopped. Then, everything went quiet. Even their own breathing sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Can you guys get out of this before the next call comes through? Because the gate doesn't open twice." The lantern that wouldn't go out when the group finally stopped running. They found themselves standing in a small clearing surrounded by tombstones that leaned toward them like curious watchers. None of them could tell how long they'd been moving, minutes, hours, maybe more. The mist refused to lift, and the air pressed down like a heavy blanket. Bo bent over, hands on his knees, panting. Okay, tell me someone remembers where the gate is." Min turned slowly, scanning the endless rows of graves. "We were running toward it." "I think you think," Luan barked. "You're the one who opened that stupid gate." Min didn't answer. The words hung in the air, sharp and trembling. The lantern lay on the ground where Duck had dropped it, flames somehow still flickering despite being doused in mud. The light was weak, but it felt alive to alive. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Keen squinted at it. "That's not normal, right?" "No," Bo said quietly. "No, it's not." Min knelt, picking up the lantern. The glass was cracked, yet the flame inside burned brighter, almost golden now. "What if—" He hesitated, glancing around. "What if this is guiding us out? Guiding us where?" Luan snapped. Min didn't have an answer. But when the flame shifted slightly, glowing brighter toward a narrow path between the tombs, they followed. It wasn't bravery, more like desperation dressed as logic. The path wound downward, through patches of overgrown weeds and crumbling statues. Occasionally, they saw carvings on old stones, names too eroded to read, symbols that looked like eyes, circles, and strange twisted letters. "Don't look too long," Duck muttered, noticing the way the lines seemed to move under the light. They kept walking. At one point, Bao whispered, "Does it feel like we've been here before?" No one replied, because they all felt it. Every turn looked the same. Every crooked tree mirrored the last. Only the lantern's light seemed to know where to go. Then it began to flicker again, not from wind, but rhythmically like Morse code, though none of them could read it. Keen frowned. "You guys hearing that?" "Hearing what?" Min asked. Keen pointed to the flame. "It's humming." They leaned closer. The sound was faint but real, a low hum that vibrated through the air, through the ground beneath their shoes. And then they realized it wasn't coming from the lantern, it was coming from below. The soil shifted beneath their feet, cracking softly like frozen earth thawing. The humming grew louder before they could react. A patch of ground caved in. Bo stumbled backward, shouting as something long and pale reached out from the dirt, a skeletal hand clutching at the air. At nothing. The fingers twitched, then went still. No one breathed. The flame dimmed. Duck whispered, "We need to go back." Min held up the lantern. "Go back where?" "You want to call the thing from the mausoleum again." But the moment he said it, the lantern flared violently, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the light dimmed, they saw something new. A figure stood at the end of the path. It wasn't moving, just standing, watching. Its robes were dark, soaked as if it had just climbed out of the earth. Its head was tilted slightly, like it was studying them. Keen whispered, "Who's that?" The figure didn't answer. Min lifted the lantern higher. "Hey, we're lost. Can you help us get out?" The figure stepped closer. That's when they saw it didn't have a face. Just smooth, grey skin stretched where eyes and mouth should be. The lantern's light began to fade again. "Run," Luan hissed. They did. Branches whipped their faces as they stumbled through the fog. The flame inside the lantern sputtered but refused to die, glowing fiercely, now almost too bright to look at. Behind them, something dragged across the ground, slow but steady. The sound of wet fabric, the crunch of old leaves. The light from the lantern grew hotter, so much that Min had to hold it at arm's length. Then the path opened up into a wider clearing. At the center stood a massive stone slab, engraved with unfamiliar markings. Something had carved a spiral pattern across it, leading to a small circular hole in the middle. Min stopped. "It's pointing here," he said. "Look at the light, it's brighter near the hole." Minbao warned. "Don't," but Min was already moving closer. The air around the stone pulsed, faintly breathing. The flame inside the lantern leaned toward the hole, like drawn by invisible wind. When Min lowered the lantern to look inside, the fire stretched out, literally stretched like a golden thread being pulled from the glass. It vanished into the hole. And then, suddenly, the lantern went out. Everything plunged into darkness. For a full minute, no one moved. They could hear each other's breathing, fast and uneven. Then somewhere in the darker, small voice whispered, "You shouldn't have taken my light." The sound wasn't human. It was too soft, too hollow, as if the air itself was speaking. Min froze. "Did you guys?" Before he could finish, a cold hand brushed his neck. He screamed and dropped the lantern. It shattered. The others ran. Again, always running. And yet, when they finally dared to stop, the lantern was somehow back in Min's handhold again, flame burning just as before. But this time, it wasn't gold, it was blue. Keen whispered. "You saw that, right?" The color changed. Min nodded slowly, eyes wide. "I didn't relight it." The flame danced softly, glowing colder than ice. And as it swayed, faint words formed in its light, hovering like smoke. "Follow me." "Do we?" Bo asked weakly. But Min looked around. The shadows seemed to pulse in time with the flame. "I think we don't have a choice." So they followed. Again. Somewhere in the distance, the fog seemed to part, revealing faint shaped stone steps, old statues, something that looked almost like a chapel. And though they didn't know it yet, what waited for them inside would make the phone, the hand, and the whisper feel almost merciful, because sometimes the lantern doesn't guide you home, it guides you where it came from. "Can you guys get out before the flame burns blue forever?" The chapel without a door. The mist thickened as they approached the shadowed outline ahead. What first looked like a chapel slowly took shape under the lanterns. Cold blue lighter, tall stone structure, half buried in the hillside. Its windows black and hollow, its roof warped as though it had melted centuries ago. The strangest part, there was no visible entrance. "Tell me I'm not seeing this wrong," Keen muttered. "No doors." Min turned the lantern, scanning the walls. "No, just cracks. Maybe a back entrance." Duck frowned. "Why would a chapel have no doors?" "Maybe it wasn't built to let people in," Bao murmured. That silenced them. The light inside the lantern pulsed once softly, insistently, pointing toward a narrow slit at the base of the chapel's wall, no bigger than a window for a cat. Luan crouched down. "No way anyone's fitting through that." Min tilted his head. "No, but maybe the flame can." He held the lantern closer, and the blue light began to swirl inside, spinning faster and faster until a thin stream of fire shot out through the glass, slipping like water into the slit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, groaning sound, the wall itself shifted. It wasn't a door that opened, it was stone parting like skin, a jagged wound forming across the wall. Luan stumbled backward. "What the don't?" Bao warned, grabbing Min's shoulder. "Don't go in there." But the lantern's blue glow had returned, flickering in time with something inside the chapel. It was calling them, pulling them. They stepped forward, one by one. Inside, the air was thick, unmoving. Dust floated in blue light like suspended ash. The floor was stone, cracked and uneven, with strange markings carved in concentric circles leading toward a raised altar at the center. Keen's voice echoed softly. "Is that blood?" The markings were filled with a dark, dried substance. Hard to tell what it was, but every instinct screamed that it wasn't paint. On the altar lay a single object, an old rotary phone, the kind their grandparents might have used, dust-covered, yet impossibly familiar. Duck froze. "You've got to be kidding me." "It's the same phone," Min whispered. From the cemetery gate, Bao stared at him. "How can it be here?" Min didn't answer. He moved closer, drawn by the rhythmic pulse of the lantern, which glowed brighter as he approached. The phone began to hum softly. Then, a sharp click. The rotary dial spun on its own. Everyone jumped. Luan hissed, "Min, step away." But Min's hand was already reaching for the receiver. When he lifted it, the sound that came through wasn't a voice. It was breathing, slow, steady, and too close. "Who's there?" Min whispered. The breathing stopped. Then, a distorted voice answered, fragmented, stretched thin like it was underwater. "You opened." The light. Min froze. What do you want? To come back. The line crackled violently, and the lantern flared, blinding blue. Suddenly, the carvings on the floor began to glow, filling with light that pulsed outward in waves. The entire chapel trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Min, Bo shouted, drop the phone. But Min couldn't move. His eyes were wide, glassy. He whispered something no one could hear, then nodded slowly, as if listening to instructions. The blue light from the lantern rose, spreading through his body like veins of fire. Duck grabbed him. Min, snap out of it. Then, as if something broke free, the flame burst from the lantern completely, floating in mid-air, forming a swirling shape above the altar. It wasn't smoke, it was a figure. A woman, translucent and flickering, her face half burned, eyes hollow. She opened her mouth to speak, but the sound came out as static. The chapel's air turned colder than ice. Luan whispered, trembling. Is that her? Bo swallowed. Who? The spirit that guided us. The ghost reached for the phone. The receiver lifted on its own, hovering in front of her. Then, the voice on the other end shifted, now clear, echoing from the air itself. I waited for the ones who listen. Min blinked, finally coming back to himself. Listen to what? The stories left behind. Suddenly, the entire chapel filled with overlapping whispers, maybe thousands each, telling fragments of lives long gone. Soldiers crying for mothers, women singing lullabies in a language no one knew, children laughing before turning to screams. The sound built until it became unbearable. Duck dropped to his knees, covering his ears. Make it stop. Min held up the lantern, now glowing so bright it turned white. They're trying to be heard. The ghost turned toward him. Not all voices are meant to be heard, child. Then, the flame inside the lantern inverted, blue turning to black. The whispers stopped. Everything went still. When the light returned, they were standing outside again. The chapel was gone. Only an empty patch of ground remained, grass untouched, as if the building had never existed. The phone, however, was still there, sitting quietly in the dirt. Bo kicked it lightly. So what now? Keen sighed, rubbing his temples. Now we leave, before something else decides to make a call. But as they turned to go, the phone rang once softly. They all froze. Min stared at it, shaking his head. Don't nobody touch it. No one did. Still, the sound lingered in their ears, long after it stopped ringing. And from deep in the mist behind them, a woman's voice whispered faintly, too soft for words, yet somehow saying everything at once. Can you guys walk away while the line's still open? The woman beneath the trees. They didn't talk much after the chapel vanished. The air was heavy, and every step back toward the village road sounded wrong to hollow, like walking across a drum. Even the cicadas had gone silent. Bao broke the quiet first. I'm telling you, that wasn't just a ghost. It knew us. Keen scoffed weakly. You think some centuries-old spirit memorized your name? I didn't say that, Bo muttered, but she said she'd been waiting for the ones who listen. What if that means us? No one answered. The night stretched on, colder than before. Their flashlights flickered in unison, and then just ahead something shimmered between the trees. Wait, Min whispered. Do you see that? A figure stood beneath an old banyan tree, her long veil fluttering despite the still air. At first, she looked like a statue, a woman carved from pale light, but when she turned her head, her eyes reflected blue, like the lantern's flame. Luan took a step back. Nope, not again. But the woman raised one hand slowly, pointing toward the dirt path behind her. The gesture was calm, almost kind. She's not attacking, Min murmured. Doc clenched his fists. Not yet. They hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. Then, faintly, they heard it, a woman's voice humming a tune. The melody was soft and hauntingly familiar, the same lullaby Min's grandmother used to sing when he was a child. He blinked, confused. That song, how does she know that? The woman tilted her head, as if she'd heard his thought. Then she stepped backward into the darkness, fading toward the direction of the cemetery. Without thinking, Min followed. Hey! Bo shouted, sprinting after him. The others had no choice but to chase, their lights bouncing wildly through the trees. The forest swallowed them whole. Minutes or maybe hours passed before they reached the clearing again. The cemetery gate stood open this time, creaking softly. And beneath the banyan tree, in the middle of the graveyard, the woman waited. She was clearer now, her face visible beneath the veil, pale skin, deep-set eyes, and a faint scar across her neck. Her mouth moved, but the sound was buried beneath the wind. Keen whispered, "Min, stop walking. She's not human." But Min kept moving forward, drawn by something deeper than fear. He stopped only when he stood a few feet away from her. The lantern, still in his hand, began to flicker violently. The woman extended her arm, palm open. Resting on her hand was an object wrapped in linen. Min hesitated, then slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a small bellode, tarnished, with a faint inscription around its edge. As he examined it, the bell rang on its own. The sound was soft but bone-deep, like it struck inside their skulls instead of the air. And then everything changed. The graves around them shifted. The soil moved, rising and falling like the earth itself was breathing. The headstones glowed faintly, and whispers leaked out from beneath the ground. Duck cursed, "We're getting out of here." But Min stood frozen, his eyes wide. He could hear them, the whispers forming words, calling his name over and over. He turned to the others. "They're saying my name." Bo grabbed him by the arm. "We're leaving, Min." Yet even as they ran, the sound of the bell echoed through the air, distorting the world around them. The mist twisted into shapes, faces, hands. Broken silhouettes reaching out from the fog. Kien tripped over a root and fell hard. When Bo turned to help him, something else grabbed Keen's ankle, a pale, cold hand pulling him toward the earth. He screamed, "Get it off me!" Luan lunged forward, yanking him free, dirt flying everywhere. But when Keen looked down again, a single mark remained burned into his skin, a faint circular scar that looked like the bell's symbol. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," Bo panted, "but I think it means we're marked." They kept running until the trees thinned, revealing the outline of the village below. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Min looked back toward the forest. The woman in the veil still stood beneath the banyan tree, the bell now silent in her hand. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, dozens of faint figures had appeared, men, women, children, all watching silently. Their eyes glowed faintly blue, and when she lifted her hand, they all lifted theirs to. Min whispered, trembling, "She's not leading us away. She's leading us in." A gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint toll of a distant bell. "Can you guys still find your way home while she's calling?" The bell that shouldn't ring when dawn finally came. It didn't bring comfort, only the dull gray of a morning that felt wrong. The forest behind them was quiet again, too quiet. The air carried no birdsong, only the faint, sour smell of rain that hadn't fallen. They stumbled back to the old guest house near the edge of the village, exhausted. Bao threw the lantern onto the table and slumped into a chair. "I'm done," he said hoarsely. "We're not going back there, ever." Min didn't answer. He sat apart from the others, staring at the small bell in his hand. Its surface was cold and wet, but not from dew. It pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. Luan paced the floor. What even happened back there? "Ghosts don't just hand you cursed objects." "She wasn't attacking us," Min murmured, his eyes unfocused. "She was warning us. Warning us." Duck snapped. "She dragged us into a cemetery and almost buried Keen alive." Keen, pale and trembling, pulled up his pant leg. The circular mark still burned faintly, dark as iron. It looked older now, almost like it had always been there. "Maybe," he said weakly, "it's not a curse. Maybe it's the bell rang. No one had touched it." The sound was sharper this time, slicing through the stale air like glass breaking underwater. It echoed once, twice, and then the old wall clock on the far side of the room started ticking backward. Bo swore, "Nope, we're leaving this place." But the front door wouldn't open. Luan tried the latch again and again, even kicked it, but it held fast like it had been sealed from the outside. Then, faintly, the phone on the table began to ring. A black rotary phone, something no one remembered seeing before, sat there, its cord snaking into the wall. "Don't answer it," Duck hissed, but Min was already moving toward it, as if compelled. His hand hovered above the receiver. "Min, stop," Bo shouted, lunging forward. Too late. Min picked up the phone. "Hello." The room fell silent. Then a voice whispered through the static, soft and hollow, like someone speaking from beneath water. "You found the bell. Now you must listen." Min's face went pale. "Who is this?" "We were buried beneath the old stones. The bell was the keeper. It should never have been silenced." The line crackled. Behind Min, the others could faintly hear something else, a rhythmic sound, like digging. "Buried," Bo whispered. "Buried where?" The voice continued, ignoring him. "The woman you saw was the watcher. She guards the threshold between silence and memory. When the bell rings, the door opens. You cannot stop it now. Min dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a loud clack, but the voice didn't stop. The sound came now from everywhere inside the walls, the floorboards, even the air. Find the grave with no name. Return the bell before the sun sets twice, or the marked one will take your place. All eyes turned to Keen. His breath caught. Take my place. What does that mean? Before anyone could answer, the lights flickered and then the shadows moved. They weren't just cast by the flickering bulbs. They slithered, stretching along the walls like living things. From each corner of the room, shapes began to form, faces pressing out from the wallpaper, mouths moving silently. The bell rang again. The shadows froze. Then, as quickly as it began, the light steadied. The phone was gone. So was the sound. Min collapsed to the floor, clutching the bell against his chest. We have to go back, he whispered. Bao stared at him in disbelief. Are you insane? We barely made it out alive, she said before sunset. Min said, his voice trembling. If we don't return it, something happens to Keen. Everyone turned toward Keen again. His breathing was shallow, sweat beading his forehead. The circular scar on his leg now pulsed faintly, glowing with the same blue light as the woman's eyes. Luan swallowed hard. Then we go. We go now. The group gathered their things in silence. The morning sun was already rising, pale and uncertain behind the clouds. Before stepping out, Min glanced once more at the spot where the phone had been. For a split second, he saw something glinting there, a single drop of water, perfectly still, and in its reflection, he thought he saw the face of the veiled woman. Watching, the bell pulsed once more in his hand. Outside, the wind began to hum the same lullaby from the graveyard, and the village dogs started to howl. To be continued. The bell that shouldn't ring the church at the edge of the village had stood empty for decades, its steeple crooked, its bell rusted silent since anyone could remember. Locals avoided it, calling it the throat of the valley, a place where sound went in and never came back out. But tonight, as the group stumbled through the fog, following that dim flickering spirit, they heard it, a single hollow gong. The sound rolled across the gravestones like thunder underwater. Every dog in the village howled once and went quiet. The young men froze midst. None of them spoke. None of them dared to breathe. Then it rang again. Toon was the first to whisper, "No one's supposed to be up there." The spirit hovered ahead, its faint outline now glowing a little brighter, a thin, trembling light in the mist. It pointed toward the church, then to the group, as though saying, "Come see." They hesitated. But curiosity, that reckless, teenage hunger for something forbidden, won over fear. Inside, the air was colder. The wooden pews were warped and green with moss. Candles from a forgotten service still lined the altar, their wax-hardened and hanging above everything was that massive iron bell, black, cracked, and slick with dew. B&H, always the brave one, shone his flashlight upward. "See, the rope's cut. That bell can't ring." But then, from behind them, a small door creaked open by itself. Inside the bell tower, a narrow staircase spiraled upward. The air was thick with the smell of iron and dust. Step by step they climbed, the wood groaning beneath their weight. The spirit followed silently, gliding just ahead, occasionally flickering out and reappearing further up. When they reached the top, the bell was swaying slightly. No wind, no movement, just the faint rhythmic motion, as if something invisible had nudged it, and then a shadow passed behind it. "Who's there?" Wee's voice cracked. The answer was another gong, this one louder, so loud it seemed to shake the bones in their skulls. The whole tower vibrated, dust fell like snow. The spirit turned toward them suddenly, its one soft features contorted, not angry, but desperate, almost pleading. It reached out toward the bell, then toward them, shaking its head wildly as if warning them to stop. But the group didn't understand. B&H reached out and touched the rope stump hanging from the beam. It was damp and frayed, but warm. Then came the impossible. The bell rang again, but this time, no sound came out. Instead, the air grew heavy, pressing against their ears like a scream swallowed whole. For a few seconds, the world was soundless. Even their breathing vanished, and when the silence finally lifted, they weren't alone. Standing in the tower with them were 5 new figures, faint, translucent, each wearing the same style of clothing as they did. Even the same expressions frozen in fear, ghostly copies. Each reflected the movements of its living counterpart, but slightly out of sync, as if caught in a lagging mirror. The spirit's light dimmed to a dull ember. It floated between the two groups, the living and the reflections, and whispered something lost in static. Only one word escaped clearly: remember. Suddenly, the bell's surface began to pulse, faintly glowing with gold. Engraved symbols appeared, names, dozens of them, spiraling around its body. The last line was half-fated, but unmistakable, for those who disturb the sleep of the hill. And then, a strange, unrelated detail broke the tension. A single white feather drifted down from nowhere, landing on Toon's shoulder. None of them had seen a bird. None of them dared to brush it off. Another impossible story emerged from that night. The villagers used to tell of a bell that only rang for the dead, never for the living. When someone's name appeared on it, that person would hear a single toll 3 days before they vanished. But the catch was cruel. No one else could hear it. Only the chosen. The group descended, shaken, trying to act normal. But outside, the fog had thickened again. The village lights were gone, replaced by dim blue lanterns floating through the mist, moving slowly toward the cemetery. "Are those people?" we whispered. The spirit floated ahead, its light flickering in rhythm with the lanterns, as though guiding them toward the next horror dot behind them. The bell rang one final time, soft, distant, but unmistakably clear. Toon froze. "You guys, did you hear that?" But the others looked at him, confused. "Hear what? Can you guys get out of this before it rings again? Because sometimes, the sound that no one else can hear isn't in your head, it's calling your name from the other side." Lanterns of the forgotten path of fog was now so thick that the village felt like a faded painting, colors dulled, shapes melting into each other. Every step the group took left no sound, as if the earth had stopped listening. The spirit drifted ahead, its pale glow barely enough to light the ground. Toon kept glancing back, hearing echoes of the bell. No one else reacted. He told himself he was imagining it. Maybe it was still ringing in his bones. But then came another sound, the faint, rhythmic swaying of glass lanterns. A dozen blue lanterns hovered among the tombstones, moving in slow, synchronized arcs. At first, the young men thought it was just the mist playing tricks. But as they approached, the lanterns began to rise, revealing the faint shapes of people beneath them. Figures, each one dressed in old village garments, torn shirts, headscarves, bare feet sinking into the wet soil. Their eyes glowed like the lantern flames they carried. The group stopped, frozen mid-step. "Maybe it's the villagers," Benuin whispered, though his voice sounded unconvinced. The spirit turned to them. For the first time, its face looked human, calm, almost sad. It pointed down the path where the lanterns led, urging them to follow. And that's when the first impossible story began. People used to say that the forgotten road behind the cemetery wasn't built by humans at all. It appeared only once a generation, when the village lost someone they shouldn't have. The dead, unable to rest, would light the way home themselves. Those who followed the lights would never return, but their voices could sometimes be heard, whispering just before dawn. We laughed nervously. "We're not really doing this, right? Following ghost lanterns," but no one answered. The spirit floated closer, brushing past Toon's shoulder, and instantly, his body went ice-cold. The fog parted, revealing a narrow dirt path, lined with roots and broken statues. The lanterns drifted ahead, swaying gently like they were carried by invisible hands. Each flicker illuminated carvings on the trees, names scratched deep into bark, dates long erased by time. As they walked, one of the lanterns suddenly floated lower, stopping beside an unmarked grave. The spirit paused there, bowing slightly. Then, out of nowhere, they heard a man's voice whisper, "Do not take the path twice." They froze. "Who said that?" Bien spun around, but the others just stared blankly. No one had spoken. The lantern flared once, then went out, just vanished. Weirdly, the smell of jasmine filled the air. Not rotting flowers, not decay, just clean, sweet jasmine, like something you'd find in a temple. It didn't belong there, yet it made the fog shimmer faintly gold for a moment. They continued forward, each step heavier, the spirit gliding just above the ground. The path twisted deeper into the woods, and that's where they saw it, an archway of stones, draped in vines, pulsing faintly with light. Toon whispered, "This wasn't here before." The spirit hovered beside it, pointing at the arch. Through it, they could see the faint outline of a village, their village, but it looked different. The houses were older, smaller, smoke curled from the chimneys, and people moved through the streets with torches. The group exchanged looks. "That's impossible," we muttered. "That's like 100 years ago." The second impossible story began right there. The villagers used to tell about the Mirror Gate, a place where the dead watched over the living through time. If someone entered by mistake, they'd live the same day over and over, forever stuck between dawn and midnight. The spirit turned to them again, its face trembling like rippling water. It pointed to the gate, then placed a hand over its heart, an unspoken question. "Will you trust me?" Toon nodded slowly. They stepped through, and just like that, the air changed. The fog was gone. The ground beneath their feet felt firm. They were back in the village, only not quite. The people who walked past didn't seem to notice them. The same streets, the same temple, but everything was quieter. The sky was orange, like an endless sunset that refused to fade. Children ran by, their laughter echoing too clearly, but their shadows didn't follow them. Hui reached out to touch one of the wooden doors nearby, and his hand went through it as if it were made of smoke. The spirit floated toward the center of the street, where an old woman knelt beside a well, murmuring prayers. When she lifted her head, her face looked eerily familiar. She had Toon's eyes. "She looks like..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The woman whispered something in the old dialect, and even though the words were ancient, the meaning was clear. "Remember the debt." At that moment, every lantern in the air turned red. The ground trembled. The village image started to collapse, dissolving like paint in water. The group grabbed each other, trying to run back through the archway, but it was gone. The spirit turned one last time, its glow flickering like a candle in the wind. It mouthed something too quiet to hear, then vanished. The red lanterns burst all at once, releasing a rain of ash that fell upward into the dark, and just when they thought it was over, Toon felt something vibrating in his pocket. He pulled it out, the old phone again, covered in grime, screen cracked but glowing faintly. A new message appeared. "Follow the next light. Can you guys get out of this before the lanterns stop moving? Because when the last one fades, it won't just be dark, it'll be your turn to carry the light." The bell beneath the earth, the fog returned before the group could even catch their breath. Toon's phone flickered, the cracked screen pulsing like a heartbeat. The spirit was gone, and in its place, the ground trembled softly, like something big was breathing underneath. "Did that feel like an earthquake to you?" Byron H. asked. His voice came out shaky, half joking, half-praying. Hui crouched, pressing his ear to the soil. "No, it's coming from below us." The vibration deepened into a low hum, not mechanical, not thunder. It was a bell. A single toll, muffled and drawn out, rose from beneath the cemetery ground. Every grave, every patch of moss, every cracked tombstone seemed to quiver in rhythm with it. The old stories said that a buried bell lay beneath the village, a warning to the living, a call for the lost. It had been silent for centuries, until now. The group stared at each other. Toon's phone buzzed again. A new text flashed across the shattered glass. "Don't answer, just listen." Too late. The second the bell rang again, the fog tore open. A burst of cold air rushed past them, smelling of wet clay and burnt incense. Shapes formed in the mist, outlines of people kneeling, praying, their mouths moving soundlessly. Lan looked around, trembling. They looked like monks. They were, dozens of them, dressed in tattered saffron robes, faces hidden beneath hoods. They moved in perfect unison, circling the group in silence. Then, one monk raised his head. His eyes were hollow, just empty sockets glowing faintly blue. Toon's instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs refused. The bell tolled again, and the monks knelt as one, pressing their foreheads to the ground. The earth split open beneath them, revealing a pit glowing with red embers, and from that pit, something metallic began to rise, a bell, enormous and ancient, covered in crawling script that glowed like molten gold. Its sound shook the air itself. The first impossible story of this section began there. The villagers once said the bell had been forged with the ashes of 100 monks who died defending the temple from fire. Each toll was said to call one soul back to finish their prayer, even if it meant walking from the grave to do it. Now, the same bell rang again, and the same monks seemed to rise once more. "Don't move," Toon whispered. "If we stay quiet, maybe they'll..." The phone rang. A shrill, old-fashioned tone split the air. Every monk turned their head in unison. The phone's screen glowed with a single message: "You shouldn't be here." Benyuan slapped it out of Toon's hand, but it didn't break. It just landed softly on the grass, still ringing, still glowing. And then the monks began to hum. It was a sound like no song, more like the world's slowest chant, each note pulling the fog tighter around them. The air thickened until breathing felt like drowning in silk. From the pit, a faint figure began to form, not human, not quite spirit. It looked like smoke given purpose. Its shape rippled, and every time the bell rang, its features grew clearer. It was the spirit again. But something was wrong. Its glow was dim, its movements jagged. It looked a tune, no, through him, and whispered without sound. Its mouth formed a single word. Below, the ground cracked. Lan screamed as the soil under her feet gave way, pulling her down to her knees. The others tried to grab her, but the mud sucked at their hands like quicksand. They heaved, dragged, pulled, and suddenly, she came free, coughing and shaking. Her leg was smeared with black soil, but her expression was worse. "There's something down there," she whispered. "Hands, cold hands." The bell rang again, a deep, final toll that shook the night apart. The monks vanished like candle smoke, and the pit sealed shut as if it had never existed. The spirit flickered once and disappeared completely. Silence. Except, no, not silence. A faint ticking, like a clock. Tune looked down. The phone was still glowing, now showing a countdown. 0:59, 0:58. Is it counting down to something? B&H asked, eyes wide. Tune stared at the numbers. Maybe the next bell. The weird, unrelated detail came next, a small, inexplicable thing that made everything worse. As they stood there, Lan pointed at the sky. "Why are the stars moving?" They looked up. Every star in the black sky seemed to shift, sliding slowly into new constellations, forming symbols that matched the markings on the bell. The heavens rearranged themselves into scripture, and from the east, a faint light began to glow. Not dawn, just a white line stretching across the horizon, like a boundary being drawn. The second impossible story unfolded in that eerie light. The villagers once claimed that when the dead couldn't rest, they would rewrite the stars to mark the border between the living and the lost. If the living crossed that line, they'd forget their own names. Toon blinked. For a split second, he couldn't remember his The countdown hit 0. A faint chime echoed, not from the phone, not from the ground. It came from inside their heads. Then the message appeared again. Follow the bell. Only one can leave. The group froze. Lan backed away. What does that mean, one? Before anyone could answer, the phone buzzed violently and split into two, literally cracked in half, each half glowing with the same words. The light from both shards reflected off the tombstones, creating ghostly shapes that seemed to move toward them, one by one. The shapes solidified into people, villagers, old and young, all holding bells in their hands. They didn't look angry. They looked expectant. The third impossible story began with their silence. It was said that when the bell of the earth rang 3 times, the dead gathered not to haunt, but to listen to the one among the living brave enough to call them by name. And as the group stood surrounded by spirits, Toon realized something. The whispers, the phone calls, the messages, they weren't warnings. They were invitations. But to what? Can you guys get out of this before the bell rings again? Because when it does, someone's going to have to answer the call. The last toll. The night had gone completely still. Even the insects stopped. The only sound was that strange ticking, steady, faint, and pulsing through the air like a heartbeat hiding under the earth. Toon stood frozen, half of the shattered phone still glowing in his hand. The light from it flickered weakly, throwing warped shadows over their faces. Lan clung to his arm, shaking. B&H and we backed up until their shoulders hit a moss-covered tombstone. Then, from the far end of the cemetery, the bell began to toll again. Once, the sound didn't come from the ground anymore. It came from everywhere, echoing from inside their heads, vibrating through their bones. The moment it rang, the mist thickened again, curling like smoke around the graves. The dead villagers, those silent figures clutching bells, began to move, not toward them, but around them, in a slow circle. Each time they turned, the small handbells they carried swung gently, producing faint, metallic chimes that harmonized with the great toll from below. The melody wasn't random. It was a pattern, a message, a rhythm that sounded eerily like a name. Toon's name. "Stop. Stop saying that," he whispered, covering his ears. But even with his palms pressed tight, he still heard it. The bell wasn't using sound anymore. It was inside him. Lan turned to him, her voice trembling. "They're calling you." "Why me?" "I think We swallowed hard. I think you answered. The others stared. Tune blinked, replaying the night in his head, the calls, the messages, the whisper from the first spirit that told him to listen. He'd picked up the phone when he shouldn't have. He'd listened when he should have run. He'd made a connection. The fog thickened again, and something began to rise from the earth in front of him. Not the bell this time, but a figure, the same spirit woman from before, her robes flowing like ink in water. But her eyes were no longer pleading. They were calm, sad. She raised her hand and pointed toward the cracked halves of Tune's phone. The screen glowed again, showing new words. The bell calls one living soul each century. Answer, and you take our place. Lan's hand flew to her mouth. No, no, that's not possible. Tune stared at the screen, his voice a whisper. Then what happens to the others? The answer came from the fog itself. They forget. And right then, Lan gasped. She looked at Tune, confusion washing over her face. Wait, who are you? He froze. Lan, it's me. It's Tune. But her eyes were blank. We and B&H looked the same, lost, disoriented, like they'd just woken up in a place they didn't recognize. The bell tolled again, twice. The spirits bowed their heads. Lan turned to we. Where are we? I don't know. I was just walking. And the memory slipped from his tongue like water through fingers. He tried again, but even his own name seemed foreign. Tune reached for them, but the fog pushed him back, a wall of cold air that separated him from the others. The spirit woman moved closer, her voice now audible but faint, like a whisper underwater. You were chosen because you listened, she said. One must always listen, so the bell may rest. Tune shook his head. No, I won't take anyone's place. Let them go. They are already gone, she said softly. Their names are fading. The moment the third toll comes, they will return to the world, empty. The fog pulsed, and the countdown appeared again in mid-air, glowing numbers hanging above the graves. 059, 058. Tune's mind raced. There had to be a way, some way, to break the ritual. He looked at the bell marks carved into the tombstones, the script that had glowed before. The words looked like old Vietnamese mixed with Sanskrit, a prayer, maybe. He started reading them aloud. The symbols responded, flickering faintly. The spirit's face changed alarm, then sorrow. Don't, but it was too late. The bell tolled a third time, and everything went white. When the light faded, the fog was gone. The cemetery was silent again, just damp grass, old stones, and the faint echo of crickets returning to life. Lan blinked awake, sitting on the path with B&H and we. What happened? Binuin rubbed his temples. I don't know. I think we fell or something. Where's Tune? They looked around. His phone lay on the ground, still cracked, still glowing faintly. Lan picked it up. The screen showed a single message. Thank you for listening. She frowned. Tune. No answer. She looked around again, confused. Who's Tune? The message vanished. The phone screen went dark. The next morning, the cemetery caretaker arrived early, carrying his old broom. He froze when he saw the earth, freshly disturbed, as if someone had been digging. He followed the tracks to the base of an old tree and found something glinting beneath the roots. A bell, small, perfectly round, still warm to the touch. When he lifted it, a faint voice whispered through the morning air. Can you hear me? The caretaker froze, eyes wide, and dropped it. But even after it hit the ground, the bell kept ringing. That night, the villagers said they heard a new sound from beneath the earth, a new heartbeat beneath the old toll. As if the bell had found its new keeper. No one knew his name, because no one remembered it anymore. The whispering field by morning, the mist had thinned, and sunlight touched the edge of the village, but it brought no warmth. Lan woke up to the sound of roosters, though she couldn't recall where she'd fallen asleep. The blanket tangled around her leg smelled faintly of smoke and earth. Her phone lay beside her pillow, screen blank, except for one odd icon, a small bronze bell symbol she didn't remember installing. She blinked, rubbing her eyes. What the... Outside, the streets were silent. Not the usual sleepy quiet of dawn. This was hollow, empty, the kind of stillness that felt. Watched. Lan stepped out of her house, or at least, what she thought was her house. The paths looked familiar, yet strange, the fences too tall, the trees in the wrong places, the clouds above tinted in pale gold, as if the sun hadn't made up its mind whether to rise or fall. She walked toward the rice fields. That's when she noticed them, hundreds of bamboo poles standing upright in the mud, each tied with small cloth ribbons fluttering in the wind. From a distance, they looked like scarecrows, guarding the horizon. But when she got closer, the ribbons moved on their own. Each ribbon whispered. She froze, her breath catching. Dozens of tiny voices murmured together, disjointed phrases, unfinished sentences, like snatches of dreams. Where are you? The bell hasn't stopped. Don't listen. Lan clutched her ears, but the whispers weren't outside. They were inside her skull. The closer she stepped to the nearest pole, the clearer one voice became a man's voice, quiet and familiar. Lan, her body locked. Who's there? It's me. She looked around. No one. Only the fields stretching endlessly under a cloudless, golden sky. I need you to remember. Something in her chest ached, a hollow, heavy sensation like missing a name she once knew. Who are you? You forgot me. The wind carried the sound of a faint bell toll. She stumbled back, clutching her chest. The image of a young man, his face half remembered, blurred, flashed in her mind. Tune. The moment she said it, the ground trembled. Every bamboo pole bent toward her as if bowing. The whispers stopped. Then, in unison, they began chanting a single word. Listen. She ran. The mud sucked at her feet, pulling her down with every step. Behind her, the field rippled as if alive, rows of poles bending, twisting, snapping one by one, as if something massive was crawling beneath the soil. She reached the small road that led toward the old cemetery, gasping for air. The horizon shimmered with heat, but instead of the familiar hill and trees, there was only open land, scorched and grey, as though a fire had erased everything. Where's the cemetery? She whispered. Gone, said the voice behind her. She turned. Tune stood at the edge of the path, or rather, what was left of him. His form flickered, half transparent, like an image projected on fog. The edges of his body faded into smoke, but his eyes were sharp, burning with a strange calm. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Lan stumbled toward him. You're alive. He shook his head. Not exactly. The bell doesn't take life. It trades memory. She stared. You mean, I forgot you? He smiled faintly. You and everyone else. Lan's throat tightened. Then how are you speaking to me now? The bell called me again. It rings when someone starts remembering. He looked toward the whispering field. You woke it. Lan followed his gaze. The bamboo poles now swayed violently, their ribbons snapping loose and swirling into the sky like ash. The air grew heavy, thick with a low vibration that made her teeth ache. What do I do? She shouted over the noise. Tune took a step closer, his form flickering. Break the circle. The poles, their graves. The bell planted them here to keep the souls quiet. If you tear them down before sunset, they'll wake, and maybe the sound cut out. His mouth moved, but no sound came. Then she heard another voice, not his, deep, ancient, echoing from the ground. The listener belongs to the field. Tune's eyes widened. Run. The mud cracked beneath her feet, and dozens of ghostly hands clawed out, gripping her ankles. Cold fingers, slick and strong. She screamed, tearing free and sprinting toward the road. Behind her, the field erupted, bamboo poles snapping, ribbons unraveling into streams of pale light. The air shimmered with faces, hundreds of them whispering in perfect unison. We remember. The sound rolled like thunder, and the horizon split open. She reached the edge of the road, collapsed to her knees, and turned back. Tune stood in the center of the chaos, the light swallowing him whole. He smiled once more. You did listen. And then silence. The field went still. The air cleared. Every bamboo pole had vanished, leaving only flat, damp earth. The golden sky faded into grey dusk. Lan sat trembling, mud caked to her hands and feet. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. When she pulled it out, the screen glowed faintly. One message, meet me where it started. Below it, the bronze bell icon pulsed once, then disappeared. The sun finally set, and somewhere, deep beneath the empty field, a bell rang once more, softer this time, almost gentle, like a heartbeat waiting to begin again. The bell beneath the hillland didn't know how long she sat there after the message appeared. The field had gone silent again, but the silence didn't feel natural. It was dense, like something holding its breath. The words "meet me where it started" echoed in her head, looping endlessly. Her hands trembled as she reread the screen, though it no longer glowed. The message had vanished, as if it had never been sent. Where it started. She whispered the words aloud, tasting them like a half-forgotten song. And then she remembered. The small hill by the west side of the village. the one where she and her friends had first dared each other to pick up the phone from the shrine house. The same phone that had rung even when it wasn't connected. Her heart tightened. That was the night Tune had vanished. The wind picked up again, brushing through the reeds with a dry hiss. Lan rose to her feet, legs heavy, and began walking. The village was empty, too empty. No distant chatter, no dogs barking, no creaking gates. Even the sound of her footsteps seemed to sink into the earth without echo. Halfway there, she passed the old well near the banyan tree. The air above it shimmered faintly, like heat rising off pavement. She leaned closer, peering into the darkness below. A faint ringing drifted up. Ding, ding ding, so soft it could have been her imagination. She stepped back quickly. Nope, not today, she muttered, forcing a nervous laugh. A crow cawed once from a nearby branch, then went silent again. When she reached the base of the western hill, twilight had already begun to sink across the landscape. The air was colder here, damp and metallic. The grass didn't sway, it only quivered, as if something beneath was breathing. She hesitated, then started up the path. The shrine still stood at the top, half collapsed, covered in vines and dirt. The same chipped wooden door hung crookedly on one hinge, and there, beside it, was the old rotary phone, resting on a rotting wooden table. It shouldn't have been there. Lan remembered clearly how they'd buried it years ago. Her chest tightened. Tune, she whispered. No answer, only the faint hum of the air. She took one cautious step forward. The phone rang. She jumped back so fast, she nearly tripped. The sound was shrill, mechanical, and wrong to reel in a place so still. It rang once, twice, and then stopped. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. With shaking hands, she pulled it out. Another message. Pick it up. She swallowed hard. No, nope, not doing this again. But even as she said it, her hand moved on its own, trembling, unwilling, like something deep inside her had already decided. She reached for the receiver. The moment her fingers touched it, the air turned heavy. The world dimmed, colors bleeding out until only shades of sepia remained. Her breath fogged in the cold. Hello, she whispered. Static crackled on the line, distant and wet, like whispers underwater. Then a voice, soft, low, broken. You came back. Her pulse stuttered. Tune, you shouldn't have remembered. The line hissed. She turned slowly and froze. The field behind her was gone. The hill, the trees, even the sky replaced by an endless plain of graves, each one marked by a bell instead of a stone, gently swaying in the wind. Their ringing was soft, hypnotic. Lan dropped the receiver, but it didn't fall. The cord had fused to her hand, sinking into her skin. She tried to pull free, but the plastic melted into her palm like wax. The phone spoke again, only now it wasn't one voice, but hundreds layered together, whispering in unison. You listened, now they will too. A shadow passed beneath her feet, as if something enormous had turned over in the soil. Bells began to ring wildly all around her, a deafening chorus of metallic shrieks. Then the ground split open. She screamed as the earth gave way, pulling her down into a tunnel of light and dust. The air filled with the smell of burning wax and old paper. Bells clanged against her ears, each sound sharp enough to slice. When she hit the bottom, she landed in darkness. Her phone flickered back to life, casting a pale glow. The floor beneath her shimmered, not dirt, but a circle of brass, engraved with spiraling words she couldn't read. At the center stood Tune. He looked almost human now. Solid, whole, but his eyes glowed faintly gold. The bell symbol burned faintly on his neck like a brand. I told you not to come, he said quietly. Lan took a shaky step forward. You sent the messages. You said to meet here. He shook his head. That wasn't me. The bell remembers every voice it ever took. Her stomach dropped. Then, what are we standing on? The first one, he said. The bell that began it all. It pulsed faintly beneath their feet, each throb matching her heartbeat. Tune reached out his hand. If you destroy it, you'll end the ringing. But you'll end me, too. Lan's throat closed. She looked around. Hundreds of smaller bells hung from the ceiling like vines, each inscribed with names she recognized. Her friends, her family, her neighbors. They're not dead, Tune said softly. They're kept, every memory traded, every story told, trapped here. That's why the phone rings. It's not haunting, it's hunger. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. She pulled it out. On the screen, one word blinked. Choose. She looked at Tune. He smiled sadly. Maybe this time, let silence win. The brass floor began to hum. glowing hotter and brighter. Lan took one final breath. Then she raised the phone high and slammed it down on the center of the circle. A blinding light exploded outward, swallowing everything, sound, sight, even thought. And for a long, long moment, there was nothing. No bells, no whispers, only peace. Then, faintly, as if from miles away, came a single, gentle chime. Ding. The village without echoes morning came too bright, too fast. Lan blinked against the sunlight and found herself lying at the base of the hill. The grass was soft beneath her, cool with dew. Her clothes were torn, her palms streaked with dirt and faint golden dust. For a brief, dizzy second, she thought it had all been a dream, until she saw the old rotary phone, cracked clean in half beside her, its cord severed. The wind moved gently across the meadow, whispering through the tall grass. The village below looked normal again. Roofs, smoke from cooking fires, even the faint chatter of someone sweeping the street. But something about it felt off, like an image just slightly misaligned. Lan staggered to her feet. "Tune," she called softly. No answer, only the echo of her own voice rolling back down the hill. She picked up her phone, the modern one, and saw dozens of missed notifications, but none were messages. Every single one was just a recording of a single tone, dinging. A chill crept up her spine. She took a cautious step toward the village. The air was heavy again, but this time not with fear, more like the stillness after a long storm. Every color seemed slightly faded, like someone had drained the world of saturation. As she walked down the dirt road, she passed the banyan tree. The old well beneath it was sealed, a smooth, solid slab of stone now covering its mouth. On the surface, faint engravings shimmered under the morning light. She leaned closer. Bells, carved in a spiral. Her reflection stared back at her. Only in that reflection, she was smiling faintly. Lan stepped back so fast, she stumbled. The reflection didn't move. It just smiled wider, teeth glinting gold for an instant before fading back into shadow. "Sure," she muttered shakily. "That's normal. Totally normal." Further ahead, she began to hear familiar sounds. Laughter, chickens, someone calling for their child. Relief bubbled up in her chest. Maybe, somehow, she'd done it. Maybe she'd ended whatever curse tied the village to that bell. She rounded the corner into the main square. Everyone was there, the vendors, the old women selling vegetables, the kids chasing each other through the dust, all smiling, moving, living, but none of them were talking. Their lips moved, but no sound came out. Lan froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She walked up to the nearest stall, a man she'd known her whole life, Mr. Barr. He was smiling politely, arranging fruit on his table. "Mr. Barr," she whispered. He looked up and nodded warmly, but his eyes were empty. Lan tried again. "Can you hear me?" He tilted his head, lips forming the shape of yes, but no sound followed. A child ran past, laughing silently, mouth wide open but completely mute. Everywhere she turned, the same, the illusion of life, but no voice, no breath, no sound but the wind brushing through. A shiver crawled up her spine. "The bell," she whispered. "I stopped the ringing, but it took the echoes." She pulled out her phone, desperate for proof she wasn't losing her mind. The screen flickered once, then glowed gold. New voicemail 1. Her throat went dry. She pressed play. A voice, familiar, distant, filled the air. "Lan, if you can hear this, then you silenced them. The bells don't ring, but the voices remain. Somewhere between us, you'll need to finish what you started. Below the church, in the catacombs, the last echo waits." Tune's voice. The message ended with a faint chime. Lan lowered the phone slowly. Around her, villagers continued their silent routines, moving like figures in a painting. The sun climbed higher, but the light stayed cold. She turned toward the old church at the end of the street, the one that had been abandoned for decades, its bell tower leaning precariously. Something about it shimmered faintly now. The brass symbol of a bell gleamed above the arched doorway, almost pulsing. Lan exhaled shakily. "You couldn't just let me have a normal morning, could you?" She started walking. The path was overgrown, vines creeping over the crumbling stone. The front doors were half broken, hanging askew. Inside, the air was thick with dust and incense, the scent of old wood and candle wax. Her footsteps echoed faintly, the only sound she could make in this voiceless world. At the back of the church, she found a narrow staircase spiraling downward. The steps were slick, carved from limestone. As she descended, the temperature dropped. The light from her phone barely cut through the gloom. The deeper she went, the louder something became. Not sound exactly, but vibration. A hum that pulsed through her bones. When she reached the bottom, she stepped into a vast underground chamber. Hundreds of bells hung from the ceiling again, smaller, cracked, blackened with age. Beneath them was a pool of still water, its surface like glass dot, and at its center stood a single brass bell, larger than the rest, half submerged. Lan's breath hitched. She walked closer. The surface of the water rippled faintly, showing her reflection again, but this time, the reflection blinked independently, eyes glowing softly. Gold dot. Her phone buzzed. A message flashed. Do not ring it. Then another, or they'll wake again. She looked up. The reflection now smiled wide, pointing towards something behind her. Lan turned slowly. The villagers stood at the entrance of the chamber, silent, still, each holding a small bell in their hands. Their eyes glowed faintly gold in the dark. The reflection in the pool whispered softly, even though its lips didn't move. You took their voices, now they want them back. Lan's phone screen cracked. The brass bell in the water began to vibrate, sending ripples through the pool, and somewhere deep inside the church, something began to stir, slow, deliberate, and ancient. The vibration built into a low hum. The villagers took a step closer. Lan tightened her grip on the shattered phone. Her heart raced. Guess silence doesn't like being ignored, she said quietly, forcing a nervous grin. The bell beneath the water shivered once more. Ding. The catacombs' last echo. The chime rang through the chamber like a heartbeat. Lan staggered backward, clutching her phone as ripples spread across the black pool. The villagers' glowing eyes flickered in unison, their heads tilting slightly toward her, as if awaiting instruction. The brass bell in the center pulsed faintly, light leaking from the cracks in its surface, like molten gold. Each pulse sent a tremor through the ground. Lan swallowed hard. You've got to be kidding me. I didn't even touch it. The villagers didn't react. They just began to move, slowly, methodically, stepping closer to the water's edge. The soundless shuffle of their bare feet was unnerving, like ghosts rehearsing a ritual. They didn't remember. Lan turned toward the staircase. If she could just make it out. The archway behind her sealed shut. The heavy stone door slid into place with a grinding echo that cut the air cleanly in two. A new vibration filled the chamber, low, steady, and unmistakably alive. Lan looked up. The bells hanging from the ceiling began to tremble one by one. A rain of dust fell as they shivered, their surfaces gleaming with faint golden runes. Then, one bell rang, a small, delicate tone, soft enough to be beautiful, terrible enough to make her stomach drop. Lan covered her ears, but the sound wasn't physical anymore. It was inside her skull, whispering through her thoughts. You silenced them once, but silence feeds on itself. The voice was neither male nor female, ancient, layered, almost tender. She shouted, but the words didn't leave her lips. She tried again. Nothing. No sound. Her voice was gone. The villagers reached the pool's edge and stopped. Their reflection in the water was wrong, distorted, as if they were standing upside down. The golden shimmer of their eyes flickered like candlelight. Lan's phone buzzed violently in her hand. It lit up, revealing a string of notifications. Unknown calling, unknown calling, unknown calling. Then, a text appeared across the screen. Answer it, or the world forgets you too. Lan stared at it, trembling. Forget me, she mouthed. The reflection in the pool smiled again. Her reflection, but older, paler. It raised a hand and mimed answering the phone. Lan's thumb hovered over the screen. The brass bell in the water let out another deep hum, vibrating the chamber walls. Cracks spread along the ceiling. A shower of dust fell around her. Okay, she whispered silently. Fine, she pressed answer. The world went perfectly still. Then came the sound, faint at first, like an old recording. A woman's voice, soft and trembling. Lan, you shouldn't have come here. Lan froze. Mom, she mouthed. They used my voice first. The whisper continued. To call others. To feed the bell. When they ring it again, it won't stop. The voice cracked, and static bled through the air. For an instant, the chamber flickered like a candle caught in wind. Lan looked down at the reflection. It wasn't her anymore. It was her mother, standing in the same place, clutching a golden bell. You have to drown it, the voice said, before it calls everything home. The call cut out. Lan dropped the phone, which shattered against the stone floor. The villagers began to move again, stepping into the pool, one after another. The The water didn't ripple, it accepted them silently, swallowing each glowing figure until they disappeared beneath the surface. Lan ran toward the brass bell. Her boots slipped on the wet stone, knees scraping against the edge. She reached into the water and grasped the rim of the bell. It was burning hot, so hot she screamed without sound. Her hands blistered instantly, but she didn't stop. She shoved with all her strength. The bell resisted, heavy as bone, ancient as the earth itself. The hum grew louder, shaking the air until the entire chamber felt alive. Above her, the ceiling began to crack. One of the hanging bells broke loose, crashing to the ground beside her. The reflection in the water, her mother was watching silently, tears streaming down her face. Lan pushed again. "Come on," she mouthed. "End it." The bell finally shifted, just a few inches, but enough for the golden light to burst through the water in blinding streaks. Then everything exploded into sound. The bells above screamed in harmony, hundreds of tones blending into an unbearable, heavenly noise. The villagers' voices returned all at once, cries, laughter, prayers, sobs. Every voice the bell had ever taken came roaring back. Lan felt herself falling, tumbling into the water. The world fractured into Flash's hands, pulling her down, eyes glowing gold beneath the surface. Her mother's face mouthing a final word, rest, then silence. Darkness swallowed the chamber. When Lan opened her eyes again, she was lying in a field. The night sky stretched endlessly overhead, full of stars. The air was warm, the grass damp. No church, no village, no phone. Just the distant sound of wind chimes somewhere far away. She sat up slowly, heart pounding. Her hands were clean, no burns, no blood, but her right palm had a faint mark, a tiny, good golden circle that shimmered when it caught the moonlight. Lan let out a shaky laugh. "You've got to be kidding me," she whispered hoarsely. "Guess I did survive the night." Somewhere behind her, a single bell chimed once. She froze. The sound came again, ding, soft, distant, but unmistakable. Lan smiled faintly, exhausted, or maybe not. She turned toward the sound, a faint glow pulsing at the horizon, gold and gentle like dawn. Her reflection in the dark water of her eyes flickered once, and smiled back. The last whisper of dawn when the first light touched the horizon. The world around Lan shimmered, as if unsure whether to remain real. The meadow looked like a painting drawn by a trembling hand, the grass too still, the mist too deliberate. She blinked, and for a heartbeat, she swore she could still hear the echoes of the bell underwater, ringing from somewhere deep within the soil. The faint golden mark on her palm pulsed once, then again, matching the rhythm of a heartbeat that wasn't hers. She flexed her fingers and exhaled. "Okay," she muttered. "If this is another test, I'm really done playing." A small voice drifted through the mist. "You did what no one else could." Lan spun around. A boy stood a few feet away, barefoot, dressed in clothes too old for his face, linen shirt, rope belt, eyes that glowed faintly gold. His smile was calm, almost kind. "Who are you?" Lan asked, though her voice felt fragile, as if one wrong word might shatter the air. He tilted his head. "I was the first one they called, the first to answer." Lan's throat tightened. "From the bell," he nodded. "The bell remembers those who listen." He looked at her palm. "And now it remembers you." The mark on her hand flared softly. "I didn't want this," she said. "No one ever does." The boy whispered, "But the sound needs a keeper. The silence needs someone to hold it back." Lan stepped closer. "You mean, I have to stay here?" He smiled, faintly sad. "Every story needs someone to end it. Even this one." Her heart pounded. Around them, the mist began to rise, curling like smoke from the earth. She could see faint silhouettes, the villagers, the priest, even her mother, standing far off in the fog. Their faces peaceful now, their mouths moving silently. "Are they free?" Lan asked. The boy nodded once. "Because of you." She took a deep breath, feeling something loosen inside her, a knot she hadn't realized had been tied for years. "Then I guess I'm done." He smiled again. Almost. A phone buzzed faintly at her feet. She looked down. Her old phone cracked. Half submerged in dew was lighting up with one final notification. New voice recording. 5:03 a.m. Lan crouched and pressed play. The audio was faint at first, just wind, and the soft ringing of distant bells. Then her own voice came through, barely above a whisper. "If you're hearing this, don't go looking for the bell. Just let it rest. Let the sound fade. Some silences are earned." She let the phone drop. feeling tears she hadn't realized she'd been holding spill freely down her cheeks. The boy began to fade with the mist. "It's time now," he said. "The sun's coming." Lan turned toward the horizon. Dawn was breaking, a gentle, forgiving light spilling over the meadow. It painted everything gold, washing away the remnants of shadow. The air felt lighter, almost sacred. She smiled weakly. "Guess I survived after all." The boy's voice was barely a whisper now. "Everyone who listens does." And then he was gone. Lan sat alone, surrounded by morning. The last trace of mist lifted, and the meadow revealed itself as nothing more than a quiet field beside a narrow dirt road. A few distant birds began to sing. For the first time in hours, or maybe centuries, there was only peace. She closed her eyes, breathing in deeply. The scent of wet grass, the warmth of sunlight, the silence that finally felt kind. Her phone screen flickered once more before dying completely, showing one last message. "The village thanks you." Lan laughed softly, shaking her head. "Yeah, sure. Next time, maybe just send a text like normal people." She stood, brushing dew from her knees, and looked back one last time. In the far distance, where the mist had vanished, a single small brass bell rested on the ground, half buried, still glinting faintly in the morning sun. For a moment, she thought about picking it up, but then, with a small smile, she turned away and walked down the dirt road. Behind her, a gentle breeze stirred the grass, and for just an instant, the faintest echo of a bell sounded, soft and distant, like a lullaby for the forgotten Dot. Then silence, the kind that didn't hurt anymore. "The night has ended, my friends. The bells have fallen quiet, and somewhere, deep beneath the roots of the earth, all those lost voices finally rest. If you're still awake, congratulations, you survived another tale. You made it through the echo, the silence, and the dawn. Dot. It's funny, isn't it, how every story about ghosts is really a story about memory, about the things we refuse to let go. Maybe that's what the bell was, a reminder that sound never truly dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to listen. So tonight, before you drift off, I want you to remember this. Not every noise in the dark means danger. Sometimes, it's just the past saying goodnight. Let the hum of your fan be the wind through old trees. Let the ticking clock be the heartbeat of a quiet world that's finally asleep. You've walked through the mist and heard the last whisper of dawn, and now you've earned your rest. Close your eyes, breathe slow. The bells are silent now. The meadow is warm, and somewhere, a small light flickers beneath the earth, not to haunt, but to keep watch until the next dream begins. Good night, my friends. Sleep well.